Challenges, innovations, solutions. This is APAC, Australia's public affairs channel.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and in a moment I'm not going to introduce Tony Abbott, but welcome Tony. But as I mentioned earlier, the work of the Centre would be impossible without the support of donors and organisations like CPA Australia, our host here today. It worried me a great deal when I was told that the CPA was offering to host us. Of course, to me, and I suspect Tony and others, the acronym CPA stood for Communist Party of Australia. Robert Menzies and Bob Santamaria would not have been pleased. Of course, CPA Australia is one of the world's largest accounting and finance bodies, representing about 140,000 accounting and business professionals. Importantly, CPA Australia and its CEO Alex Maley are thought leaders on public policy issues, conducting research, offering new ideas and supporting the work of organisations like the Menzies Research Centre. This is the second event this year that the CPA has hosted for the Centre, for which we're extremely grateful. The first being a policy announcement by Kevin Andrews, Shadow Minister for Families, Housing and Human Services, on the charitable sector. We had that in May this year in this room. Without further ado, I'd like to call upon CPA Australia's Chief Operating Officer, Company Secretary and Chief Financial Officer, Adam Orty, to address you. Adam.
Thank you, Tom. And I also won't introduce Tony, but Tony, welcome to CPA Australia's offices. And Tom, we have been called many things with our CPA acronym, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, Communist Party of Australia, Country Party of Australia, but of course we are certified practising accountants, just for the record. It does give me great pleasure to obviously welcome everybody here today. I would like to make an apology on behalf of our CEO Alex Maley, who's currently attending the UN version of the accounting world, IFAC, in South Africa at the moment, but he does send his apologies and his warm regards. Our relationship with the Menzies Research Centre is important to CPA Australia, given the work the Centre undertakes in researching and informing the debate on matters that are important to the prosperity of Australia and to CPA Australia and our members. As Tom said, we represent over 139,000 members in over 114 countries around the world, and we have an ongoing commitment to investigating and reporting on issues important to small business, as many of our members own, work or advise in small business. And I would say of that 140-odd thousand members, probably about half of our members are either working in, working for, advising or supporting small businesses around the ASEAN region. We recognise that small businesses are the engine room driving the economies of the countries in which we, CPA Australia, operate. We regularly engage with small business to hear their views about the issues that concern them and ensure that we are representing these views in our policy and advocacy work. This year we are undertaking our 4th Asia Pacific Small Business Survey through the Small Business Survey Program. We provide research to inform the decisions of policymakers around the region. In this time of the Asian century, this year our survey will cover the views of small business owners from Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong and Singapore. The results of the survey will be available shortly. We have also recently undertaken a major research project on Australia's international competitiveness to help shape future economic and social policy setting. CPA Australia undertook this project in conjunction with Professor Michael Enright, a Harvard alumni and one of the world's leading figures in competitive research. We look forward to sharing the results of the project with you when it is released in early 2013. It's now my pleasure to welcome the Honourable Bill Bilson MP to the floor. Bruce is a 6th-term member of the Australian House of Representatives, having been first elected in March 1996 to the outer Melbourne Metropolitan Coastal constituency of Dunkley. He is well versed to speak on matters of policy as they affect small business in Australia, given his role as Shadow Minister for Small Business, Competition Policy and Consumer Affairs. Bruce has also had first-hand experience regarding the difficulties and challenges of small business are facing due to these previously owning and running a fine art and craft gallery with his wife Kate. Please join me in welcoming Bruce.
Thanks, Adam, and the counselling's going well. That business is still costing us money, but we were living the small business dream. So it's great to see you all today, and I'd add my welcome as well. It was interesting if you reflected on the US presidential election in recent weeks. Often all candidates were making a clear pitch to small business. The American presidential contenders could understand how crucial small business is to the US economy and how if it's not firing on all cylinders, that represents missed opportunities for the American economy and for American people. That same conversation is the one we need to instill in Australia. At the moment, the political leadership leaves only Tony Abbott and the coalition government talking about the crucial role of small business and family enterprises to our economy and the prospects for livelihoods and future prosperity here. We want to change that. We want to make the renaissance of small business a national enterprise, a priority for all of us, all decision makers, all policy makers, so that those courageous men and women of small business who take risks, who try and create wealth and opportunity for themselves and their communities, employment for those within their communities, get the support and the partnering from the Commonwealth Government that they deserve. That's what this process is about today, refining the coalition policy so that we can be the best partner small business has had for many a long time. Now, it's not surprising that government often talks to big business and big unions, and big government finds some comfort in doing that, because that's easy. Lots of lobbyists, lots of resources, specialist department for advocacy and consultation, but that's not the story for small business. Men and women of small business are working hard every day and aren't always part of that process, and they're feeling very alienated right now as they look to Canberra and see a government that seems not to understand their plight, not to appreciate the challenges that they face, and in fact, rather than see an advocate and someone providing assistance, too often they see Canberra as an adversary to their efforts to create opportunities in our country. We want to change that. Since 2007, small business has been under siege. During the Howard government years, we saw enterprise flourish and prosper. More small business owners than union members. People feeling optimistic about if they apply themselves and work diligently, the rewards will flow. Well, that sentiment's changed. In 2007, 53% of every job in the private sector was in a small business. Today, that's declined to 45.7%. 243,000 jobs have been lost in small business at a time when our population continues to grow. According to the most recent survey series done by Dun & Bradstreet, small business insolvencies are up 48%. And equally worrying, though, is the small business startup figure sees a decline of 95%. So what economists often talk about is the destructive renewal, where a business might not succeed, but someone else is busting to come along to risk their own investment, their house, and in some cases their sanity and their relationships. That's not happening at this time. People aren't seeing a confident outlook to make those difficult choices, and we've seen that reflected in many other survey results. We'd like to change that. Our view is small business deserves a very strong voice in Canberra. Our view is that the environment needs to be conducive for that courage and that enterprise. Those with the pluck and the passion to have a go, to create opportunities for themselves in our country, deserve support and encouragement, not more and more roadblocks on the way through. It's not surprising to me that before the last election I attended a debate with the then Small Business Minister. For those in this room, yes, that was 4 ministers ago. And the commitment that was made by the Minister, the Labor Minister, was that they'd be offered more of the same if Labor was re-elected. The audible groan in the room registered a simple fact that that was not what small business was looking for. Instead, the coalition put forward a comprehensive plan, a microeconomic reform agenda, if you will, to put the business back into small business. It was not only something that the small business community received well, but in the Blue Book, the document that would be handed to an incoming government, recognised the coalition's policies would support small business and were likely to boost productivity. So even within the bureaucracy in Canberra, there was an understanding that our plan made some sense. It's not surprising that when Labor made no election commitments, since then they've borrowed 4 of ours. Not executed them well, but looking for other ideas, knowing it wouldn't come organically from within the Gillard government. We actually want the chance to implement our policy commitments, to restore small business hope, reward and opportunity. We see red tape strangling small business. I've had the joy of tracking for a number of years the regulatory activities of the government, mindful that in 2007 Labor promised for every new regulation in, one would be taken out. Well, that's not proven to be the case. There's 2,884 new or amended regulations have been introduced by Labor. 104 have been repealed. To quote that great philosopher Maxwell Smart, Chief, missed by that much. Rather than one in, one out, it's 200 new or amended regulations in for each one out. And to add injury to the insult, the Howard government put in place a sunsetting arrangement that regulations would expire after 10 years. Not content with all the regulations that have been introduced, the government's moved to extend the shelf life of 13,000 regulations that in the normal course of events should have expired in the coming years. The carbon tax, a tax designed to have small business as its victim. Despite all the carve-outs and compensation, all the hush money that's been paid, small business got no direct assistance. And we're told to simply suck it up or pass it on. In many cases, not able to do either, and without the market power to push back against that insidious tax. We want to boost competitiveness, a root and branch review of the competition laws to make sure we've got a vibrant economy that ensures that small business is given a fair go. To abolish the carbon tax, which is a tax on our competitiveness and on consumer confidence, and to help create a stronger economy, to appoint a dedicated small business and family enterprise ombudsman to quickly resolve commercial disputes so business can get on with doing business, and if it's an anti-competitive conduct, someone who will chaperone those concerns through our competition regulator, to cut $1 billion worth of red tape so people can focus on the success of the business and the opportunities that flow, not on being a compliance enterprise for the Commonwealth. And having a small business minister in Cabinet. Yes, for a sector that generates half the employment in our economy. Up until recently, Labor governments had that minister at the kids' table, not at the adults' table in the Cabinet room where influence can be brought to bear. We think unfair contracts should be extended to small business transactions. As a small business owner myself, I had no greater capacity to influence big business over take it or leave it contracts as a small business person than I did as an individual consumer, yet those legal protections aren't available to small business transactions. And also to make sure Commonwealth contracts aren't so bundled and aggregated as to make them impossible for a small business to compete for. And above all, we must end this attack on independent contractors and self-employed people. The tax office might find them inconvenient to deal with, but they are a legitimate form of small enterprise that deserve our support, not this constant stalking that they're subjected to now. I get a lot of encouragement from small business about this work. I'm often accused of being evangelical, and I am, because this matters, and it needs to matter and understood to matter more broadly across our country. But the greatest support I get is from the Leader of the Opposition, a man who's previously been the Minister for Small Business, at a time when most small businesses look back and remember that period as a golden age. Tony Abbott understands small business. He's been a great ally for them. If our work goes well and we earn the support of the Australian public, perhaps Tony Abbott will be the first Prime Minister for small business, making sure that this crucial part of our community and our economy gets the support it deserves. Please join me in welcoming Tony Abbott, Leader of the Opposition.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's terrific to be here. Thank you for your warm welcome. Adam Orty, thank you for hosting this small business forum. Professor Don Markwell from the Menzies Research Centre, I believe this is your first public event as the new director, taking over from the incomparable Julian Lisa. Thank you for your work. It's great to be in the presence of my former colleagues, Phil Baresi, the former member for Deakin, Senator Nick Minchin, a member of the board of the Menzies Research Centre now, former government leader in the Senate, my former portfolio colleague Santos Santoro, former Minister for Aged Care. It's really good to be here, and to Tom Harley, thank you for being such a superb impresario of events such as this. Yes, I too was struck by the fact that I was coming to an event hosted by the CPA, and yes, to those of our generation, CPA did have unfortunate connotations, Tom, but you know, times change. Let's face it, it was John Howard himself who, on a recent trip to China, addressed the cadres of the Chinese Communist Party. But why should anyone be surprised by that? Because let's face it, as Malcolm Turnbull keeps reminding us, not even the Chinese communists believe in a nationalised telecommunications monopoly such as the National Broadband Network. And finally, Bruce Bilson. Bruce, you have been not just a shadow minister for small business, you have been a superb advocate and evangelist for small business. I feel a little bit like that 1960s soul singer Little Richard, who used to have a support act called the Beatles. That's how I feel when I follow you at a small business function. But ladies and gentlemen, I wish to assure you, and through you I wish to assure the small businesses of Australia, that the coalition gets small business. We always have, and we always will. Many of us have been in small business. All of us appreciate that small business is the creative heart of a strong and prosperous economy, and as the creative heart of a strong and prosperous economy, small business is essential for a safe and secure Australia. We understand that every small business person takes risks in a way that your average employee of a large business doesn't. I'm full of respect for everyone doing an honest job in our economy. I am full of respect for the leaders and the senior officers of our large businesses. I'm full of respect for the people who run our charities, our community organisations, our great institutions. But they don't have their economic life on the line the way a small business owner does, who has put a mortgage on his or her house to get that business going and to employ his or her staff. This is why small business people are committed and engaged in the struggles of our economy in a way that almost no one else is. Now, part of my commitment to the small and medium businesses of our country has been extensive on-the-ground consultation with them. I don't just come to forums like this where we can talk about the problems of small business in the abstract. I go out to small and medium businesses every other day to talk to them about their issues. I asked my staff to tell me how many visits I've made since the last election to small and medium businesses. Almost 170, ladies and gentlemen. Almost 170. And it's important that I do that. It's important that I do that because there is no substitute for talking to people in their workplaces. There's no substitute to being on the spot, listening to people talk about the real issues that they face every day. And we know that there is a profound lack of confidence in our economy generally, but a particular demoralisation amongst the small businesses of our country. They do feel let down by government. Labor promised there would be no carbon tax, and there is a carbon tax. Labor promised that they wouldn't increase costs to employers with their workplace relations changes, and they have. Some businesses' labour costs are up 15% thanks to changes to modern awards under the Fair Work Act. As Bruce has reminded us, Labor promised us that there would be a one-in, one-out approach to regulation, but instead there's been more than 200 in for every one that's gone out. Labor promised us that they wouldn't tamper with superannuation arrangements. Not one jot, not one tittle of change would there be, and yet there have been constant changes, and nearly all of these changes have involved more paperwork and more red tape for the small businesses of Australia. But Labor certainly has occasionally focused on small business. Labor hasn't ignored small business. For instance, in the last MyEFO, the government gave the Australian Tax Office an additional $390 million for new compliance activities. Now, doesn't small business welcome that? $390 million so that the Australian Tax Office can pursue outstanding income tax lodgements in the micro and small business sector. I think small business should be very grateful that their friends at the Tax Office now have more money to conduct compliance audits. Ladies and gentlemen, the Labor Party, alas, doesn't get small business in the way that the Coalition does. And why would they? Because so few of them have actually lived and worked in small business the way so many of the Coalition's MPs have. I have nothing against union officials. I was a union member myself for several years as a journalist. Famously, I moved the strike resolution one day at Australian Consolidated Press when management had sacked the entire photographic department. I think there is an important and honourable place for unions in our society, but I don't believe that a political party, a government or alternative government of our country, should be owned and operated by the union movement. And that's the difficulty that business in this country has. That's the difficulty that small business in particular in this country has, that the government of our country right now is owned and operated by people who have an instinctive tendency to see business as the enemy, not as the essential friend of the prosperity of our country. As Bruce has already said, small business startups have dropped by a staggering 95%. The number going bankrupt have increased by 48%. Small business insolvencies instigated by the Tax Office are up 45.9% on previous years. There are 11,000 fewer small businesses actually employing people now than there were in 2007. The economic vitality of our country is being sapped because the small businesses of our country are being suffocated. This is the problem that we have. Now, the Coalition has a plan for our economy. In particular, we have a plan for small business. It starts, as Bruce has already indicated, with having a small business minister in the Cabinet, a dedicated small business minister in the Cabinet, because small business must be heard in the highest council of our land. We will reduce small businesses' red tape costs, by $1 billion a year, and I want to congratulate the work of the Red Tape Reduction Task Force chaired by Senator Arthur Sinodinos, which reported recently. I want to congratulate Arthur, Kelly O'Dwyer, Senator David Bushby for the work they've done, talking to small business, identifying the problems, the regulatory problems that small business face. We will stand up for the rights of independent contractors, as Bruce has indicated. We will allow a small business to send one cheque to the ATO for superannuation, and then the ATO will do the rest, if that's what small business would prefer. We will have a fair income paid parental leave scheme, and we won't expect small business to do the paperwork for it. The costs of our scheme won't be borne by small business, and the paperwork for our scheme won't be borne by small business. And yet our scheme will benefit small business because their staff will get the advantage of it. So we will do the right thing by the small businesses of Australia. I want to particularly highlight something that Bruce has already mentioned, and that is the fact that the rate of small business growth in this country has reduced dramatically under the current government. Under the former government, under the Howard government, on average there were 36,000 more small businesses at the end of every year. Under the current government there are just 15,000 more small businesses at the end of every year, and they are employing fewer people. We will restore the rate of growth of small business because we understand that small business is the engine room of our economy. I announced today that if elected, a coalition government will aim to double the existing annual rate of small business growth. There is no reason whatsoever why we should not be able to achieve an annual growth rate in the numbers of small businesses of 1.5%. This is what the Howard government was achieving. Unfortunately, the Labor government has not come close to matching it. If we can achieve this higher rate of small business growth, Australia will be adding more than 30,000 new small businesses each year. That's double the rate that we have been achieving under the current government. Specifically, the focus will be on growing the number of small businesses that employ, that provide jobs. Because I want to see, once again, small businesses providing more than half the jobs in the private sector, because that is where people get a start in life. That is where entrepreneurship is fostered and innovation happens. That's why we need to increase the rate of growth of small business. If we can get the numbers of new small businesses up, we will have an additional 15,000 contributors every year. That's 15,000 additional entrepreneurs, 15,000 additional employers and job creators, but most important of all, 15,000 additional opportunities for people, for their families. This is an important part of building our nation. This is at the heart of building our economy. I want the artisans of our country to feel that they can open businesses. I want the baristas of our country to feel that they can open cafes. I want the IT consultants to feel that they can start businesses and employ people. That's what I want, the confidence in our economy that is necessary for people to become employers again. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, or as many of you would know, just a couple of weeks ago in Melbourne, I also announced a Productivity Priorities Working Group chaired by Stephen Chobo MP that would consult further with business, particularly small business, on the precise implementation of our productivity policies. Today I release the terms of reference for this working group, and I want to stress that this working group will be talking closely over the next 4 months with the small businesses of Australia, because all of our changes have to work for you, not against you. And the best way to ensure that this is the case is to talk to you before decisions are made, not just to argue with you after the event. And that, sadly, is what has happened so often under the current government. Ladies and gentlemen, my role as a Member of Parliament, as a leader of the coalition, as the alternative Prime Minister of our country, is to try to build a better Australia. That's what we're here for, to build a better Australia. I know, because every day I am talking with people, that Australians currently have a great sense of frustration because we know we can be so much better than we are. Right now, throughout our country, there is this feeling that we are a great people being held back by a poor government. Now, I don't think government has all the answers, but I think government comes closest to having the right answers when it trusts the people, when it appreciates that the people of Australia know what's best for them more than the official. So my vision for Australia is for a country where citizens count for more and officials count for less, where government is smaller and more effective, and all the other organisations have the opportunities to be bigger and more effective. I want an Australia which is known throughout the world for its great people, not just for its big government. My vision for Australia is to help each of you better realise your vision for Australia. Now, there's a couple of million small businesses in this country. Each one of those small business owners has an idea how his or her business can expand, how his or her business can improve, and my job as the leader of the coalition and as the alternative Prime Minister of the country is to assure them that we understand and that we will work with them. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Don Markwell, Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, and I'd like to move a vote of thanks to Tony Abbott for his very fine speech to us this morning, which reflects the fact, I believe, that he and the coalition which he leads do understand, deeply respect and are committed to small business, as he put it, as the creative heart of a prosperous Australian economy. Amongst the many things that Tony said, I thought it was particularly impressive to hear the figures about the number of small businesses that he visits. He is a person who, like Bruce Bilson, listens to small business, and I think that that was evident this morning. I think it was evident that he understands the challenges that they face and that he's committed to positive steps to boost the growth of small business, to support small business, and not least, as one of our speakers said earlier this morning, to get out of the way of small business. I think we can be certain that Tony will listen to the ideas coming out of today's discussion, the sessions we've had, the session we've had earlier, the sessions we'll have later on, which I know that Bruce and I will be ensuring that he receives the ideas coming out of today. I think it's evident that he is listening through the Productivity Priorities Working Group, and he said that just now that the terms of reference for that group have just been announced. He's listening through inviting your comments on the deregulation task force paper. All of this is on Tony's website. So I'm enormously grateful, as I'm sure we all are, for Tony's speech this morning. Indulge me, please, just for one moment, if I say something personal as well, because in October 1981, Tony Abbott and I started at the same time in Oxford, as he is Rhodes Scholar for New South Wales and me for Queensland. Over the subsequent 2 years, as Tony came to be truly a legend amongst students in Oxford, we came to know each other very well, and I came to know a truly authentic, smart, warm-hearted, generous and compassionate, courageous fellow student with a philosophical turn of mind, a keen interest in public policy, and, like Bob Hawke before him, the charm of a larrikin. He was proudly Australian and an obvious natural leader, unafraid to be himself. Today, again speaking personally, I would not have taken on the role of Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, the Liberal Party's public policy think tank, if I did not believe that Tony Abbott has the character, values, ability, experience, commitment to better public policy for Australia, and the leadership capacity to be a superb Prime Minister for our country. Tony's commitment to public policy has been reflected in his very active support over the years for the work of the Menzies Research Centre, including initiating as well as taking part in roundtables such as today. Today's session would not have happened if it were not for the initiative of Tony Abbott. Ladies and gentlemen, before you are rewarded with your morning tea, would you join me please in thanking Tony Abbott, who I hope will be the Prime Minister for small business in Australia.
I can't allow Don to praise me like that without standing up here to say you exaggerate, I'm sure. But mate, can I just again say how really thrilled I am to have you as the Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, a think tank associated with a political party is incredibly lucky to have someone of your stature at our helm, a former Deputy Vice-Chancellor of one of our great universities, the retiring Warden of Rhodes House in Oxford, is a person of academic stature and administrative substance way beyond the norm in these sorts of things. I have to say, you are following a really outstanding MRC Executive Director in Julian Leeser, but I think that the Menzies Research Centre can reach very great heights indeed under your leadership. And can I say to you that we in the Coalition will do our best to be worthy colleagues in the battle of ideas. As you know, Bruce Bilson is not just the Minister, but he is an evangelist. Senator Scott Ryan, the Parliamentary Secretary for Small Business, shares Bruce's evangelism in this area. Our whole team is totally committed to small business, but more than anything else, our whole team is committed to winning the battle of ideas, to promoting good values, and to building a better society based on those good values. So I hope whenever your term as head of the Menzies Research Centre ends, you will feel that it has been a very worthy way to spend some of the most productive years of your life. Thanks so much, Don, and on behalf of myself, on behalf of Bruce, the Shadow Minister, on behalf of Scott, the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary for Small Business, we think it's very, very appropriate that your first major public event as the Executive Director should be this event in support of small business.
Education, interaction,